The original Nintendo Switch review. This is the third system that I reviewed now on my channel. I reviewed the Wii and the Wii U previously. I will put links up to them at the end of this video if you want to see how I rate them. Now this is mostly going to be my thoughts on the system and its games. I say mostly because both of my kids have given me their statements and their grades on the system, and I'm going to relay that to you. One is definitely more brief than the other, but that will be towards the end of this. Let's start with the system. It had an interesting concept of being both a home console and a handheld. Now I do want to get this out there that 99% of the time I had the Switch dock. I found the screen too small to really use handheld, and I preferred playing it on the TV. To be fair, I really don't like playing handheld at all. I would have really had to love the series in order to actually play it that way. A good example of this might be the Phoenix Wright series. I played those on the DS. I really enjoyed that series a lot, and I love that most of them came to the Switch, funny enough, with the exception of that piece of shit Professor Layton versus Phoenix Wright game. I guess it's good that it never came, and I hope it never will. Please don't make me replay that abomination. On the small occasions that I did play handheld, I always found the Joy-Cons a little bit small, and later in life it would be too loose in the rails. But the system was 7 years old, so I figured it was just due to old age. The left stick did have an issue with drift, and I replaced it with a new set. I got the Zelda Joy-Cons and they worked fine. The drifting on the left analog stick was a frustrating problem for the system that Nintendo really never fixed. They just made it less common. From what I hear, they're still using the same kind of analog controls in the Switch too. I don't know why Nintendo wouldn't just change them to something more reliable. The system had an OLED upgrade, and the screen looked fantastic, and if you liked playing on handheld, this would be a great option. I was able to test it in a demo version at Target a few times, and if I actually cared about playing it in handheld, I might have actually bought it. There was also a handheld-only version, which I also tested at Target, and I'm sure someone liked it, but I found it way too small to use. I would have loved it if they made a TV-only version as well. Then they could have added like a performance boost to it. Maybe make it so we could do 2K with the dedicated console. But they really wanted to stick with the ability to switch in between them, even if they did break that with the Lite version. The games were an interesting mix. It had some really fun games that pushed the hardware of the Switch. Super Mario Odyssey, both Zelda games, Luigi's Mansion, and even the Xenoblade games. However, it does feel like the first half of games, for the most part, were better than the second. With the exception of Tears of the Kingdom, I can't think of one original game that really impressed me. Most of the time, they were just remakes or remasters of older games that were usually topping my top 10 best list, like the Thousand Year Door remake. That was great. However, towards the end we got somewhat average games, with titles like Mario & Luigi Brothership, Endless Ocean Luminous, Emio the Smiling Man, Everybody 1-2 Switch, and to a lesser degree, Zelda Echoes of Wisdom. These felt like titles that could have been better if they were not so distracted in making games for their future system. Mario & Luigi and Zelda Echoes of Wisdom were not really bad games per se, but they were just painfully average. Like in Zelda, the world they created had a lot of potential, but I found the copy gimmick really boring, and Mario & Luigi was a bloated mess. And if the story had been tightened, it would have been better. The other ones that I mentioned were pretty much just dog and they must have been very disappointing to the fans of those series, assuming there's a fan out there of the 1-2 Switch series. Even when they had a hit, they dropped the ball. They could have done so much more with the Animal Crossing series. It's their #2 selling game, and they just stopped adding things to it. It took them years after Mario Kart 8 Deluxe to come out to add anything to that. So it is possible they'll put out some updates to Animal Crossing in the future, but talk about striking the iron when it's cold. There were over 70 games that did over 1 million sales for this system, and that is extremely impressive. It might even go down to being the best-selling system of all time, and that's without a price drop yet, which is amazing. The Switch was home to a great deal of wonderful games that I never expected to see, like the Lunar series. I can't believe those games finally got out of the PlayStation's basement. That being said, it was filled with tons of garbage on the eShop. How many times are they going to re-release that AAA clock? Nintendo needs to put a stop to this. I understand allowing it on the Wii U because there was no real games being released on it, and it was kind of keeping the eShop alive, but the Switch eShop should have been way more picky on what it allowed. Now let's get to the thoughts of my two kids. But really, they're not kids anymore. They're both over 20 years old. We're going to start with the thoughts of the LilWiiviewer. So I'm going to read them to you now. And just for fun, I threw them in the AI voice changer.
It was great for the first year, but playing anything on the Switch post-2020 was painful. But at least it wasn't $500. It got to the point I never bothered to buy games on the Switch if I could just buy them on the PC, because if I did, it would always be the inferior version. The question never was, do I buy it on the PC for an experience I can control, or do I buy it on the Switch so it's portable? No, the question became, do I buy it on the PC, or do I buy it on the Switch where it won't run well? Now that being said, the Switch 2's performance really gives the Switch games that struggle the refresh they need needed. So many of those games now run fantastic, and it makes it clear the library was insanely good. It was just a shame the Switch 1 struggled to play them.
When I asked the LittlestWiiviewer what he thought, he just said,
"It was great."
Now we're going to grade what we thought of the original Nintendo Switch. The grade is going to be between A and F. The LilWiiviewer gave it a C. Performance issues were the major reason for that grade. The LittlestWiiviewer gave it an A. He loves Xenoblade, and this system gave him 4 of those games, as well as a bunch of other fun titles. I don't think performance issues factored in at all. Now I have thought hard on this. I do think the exclusives that Nintendo made were often great, but they lacked that Nintendo magic later in the life cycle. However, this has so many good games in it in the first 4 years, and really, I never cared about frame rates as long as it wasn't noticeable. Now I'm going to give it a B-. I think it stuck the landing in the first few years. Only to be clear, in the last 3 years or so that they've been saving all their best ideas for their next system. Out of the 3 systems that I've reviewed, the Wii, the Wii U, and the Switch, it definitely takes the top spot. It has the most impressive games and overall was the best of the 3.